Hey, how's it going? This is Mr. Hernandez, and I am going to go over this first section of this tiger shark's activity, comparing normal curves. So this information is going to be important, and so I'm going to go over this. You got the Atlantic coast, Florida, with a tiger shark mean length of 11.5 feet. And then you've got the adult tiger shark on the Gulf Coast of Florida with a mean length of 11.9 feet. So if you look here, according to the data, which graph would be further to the right on the number line? Well, that's the one with the highest mean. So you're looking for the highest mean furthest to the right, and that will be the 11.9 feet, which is the Gulf Coast of Florida. Now that brings me to this first graph, and near mastery is kind of an intro level of understanding where you can draw the curve with the correct means. So 11.5 is for the blue Atlantic coast, and 11.9 is for the red Gulf Coast. So here's 11.5 right here. And so I'm going to imagine, well, I don't want to make it a line. I want to make it a dotted line. That's going to be the mean for one of the curves, and then the other curve is the 11.9, which is right here. And so by identifying those means in itself, you're already at the near mastery level. Now, some students were able to draw the normal curves with symmetry, lines of symmetry here. If you did it that way, that is a near mastery level. Now, when you look at the standard deviations, though, it gives you a different story. So the standard deviation on the Atlantic coast is more than the standard deviation of the Gulf Coast, which means that it says which would be shorter or more spread out. So the spread, more spread out, is a higher standard deviation. And so the graph with the highest standard deviation is the 0.9 foot Atlantic coast of Florida. So this is the higher standard deviation. So if you would so that one would be more spread out. So if these obviously are not they're both kind of spread out the same, or more importantly, notice the peak of them, they're basically at the same peak level in terms of like height. And so if you have another example of near mastery, well, you can imagine that the the Atlantic coast, which is blue, should be more spread out because it has a higher standard deviation. It should be more spread out than the Gulf Coast. The Gulf Coast should be more narrow. So imagine, maybe making a really narrow Gulf Coast and a really wide Atlantic coast. And when you make it wide, the top of it goes lower. Now notice the spreads are correct because this one's wider, and this one's more narrow, because the standard deviation on the blue Atlantic coast is greater than the standard deviation of the red Gulf Coast. So the red Gulf Coast is more narrow, but notice their means are way off. They should be, at 11.5 and 11.9. However, this still shows near mastery by, distinguishing between the spreads. Okay, so let's go put those together. If students were able to correctly get the mean and the standard deviation together, well, that shows a higher level than near mastery. That shows mastery. And so I have the means plotted correctly, which is like this one, but then I also want to have the red more narrow and the blue more wide. Okay, so So the blue is going to be wider, and the red is going to be more narrow, which means that the peak goes up higher, okay, like this. So this is a mastery level, which is really good. Okay, well, what if we had exceeds mastery? Well, that is going above and beyond and actually labeling those, not only the mean, but the spread too. So what I mean with that is that, in the standard deviation, I mean, so the standard deviation on the blue Atlantic coast is 0.9 feet. So that means I'm going to add 0.9 feet to 11.5 to get the first standard deviation above the mean, which is 12.4. 12.4, so that's the first standard deviation. And then I add another 0.9 and I get 13.3. And remember, standard deviations go out to 3 standard deviations above the mean, and that is going to be 14.2. And if you go the other direction, well, that would be 11.5 minus 0.9, which is 10.6. And then minus another 0.9, and that's 9.7. And then it goes 3 standard deviations below the mean to the left, and that last one is 8.8. And so notice that that actually gives you an idea, like to say, hey, this side shouldn't be hitting the bottom on the right, because that's not, you know, it still can go further to the right because it should be above the third standard deviation, so it should go really low right there. And then when we look at the red curve, which is the Gulf Coast, that has a standard deviation of 0.6. So 11.9 plus 0.6 is the first standard deviation above the mean, which is 12.5. So that's here. Plus another 0.6, and that's 13.1, which is right here. Plus another 0.6. Now we're at 3 standard deviations above the mean, and that's as far as we're going to go that way. And then to the left of it, we're going to subtract the standard deviation, which is 0.6, from 11.9, and that's going to be 11.3. And minus another one, another standard deviation, so that's going to be 10.7. And then one more, and that is going to be 10.1. And that is going to allow us to go further out, especially on the right. So to get rid of that, because it should go above that all the way to here. And by labeling it and, you know, differentiating between the spreads, one more wide, one more narrow, one and adjusting the height of them with the means being labeled and the standard deviations, that is mastery. That is basically as high as you can get a level of this skill. So now my question is, how did you do? What would you, you know, how would you rate yourself? Near mastery, because you had the right mean, but the spreads were off. Or near mastery, you had the spreads right, but the mean was off. Or mastery, you had the mean and the spread. Or exceeds mastery. Actually, I should have written that somewhere else, but I'll just add that. So exceeds mastery is the mean and the spread and the standard deviation. All 3 standard deviations to the right and to the left of the mean labeled. I was actually gonna do a different slide for the exceeds mastery, but I just added the exceeds part by adding that extra standard deviation label. All right, so there's 3 levels: near mastery, mastery, and exceeds mastery. And so my question is, how did you do? And of course, if you didn't have any If you couldn't get any of these things and you had no idea, you know, that would be remediation, and so that would also be another, you know, level. And so my question is, how would you rate yourself?